This is TWiT.
So Caleb called. He's a budding photographer, as a lot of people are. Digital photography is a fast-growing hobby. And he wanted to know, should he shoot RAW or JPEG? And I tried to explain what RAW is, and that's where I really got bogged down.
Well, if he's an ambition photographer, yes, RAW is definitely a good thing. Now, let me quickly explain what RAW is, because I think, and I'm pretty much skipping now what I was planning to talk about, and I'll talk about this next week, because the RAW thing is really something that lots of photographers have questions about. So
I bet you get this question all the time for the podcast. I mean, this is...
I do.
Yeah. You see it as a setting. You also see in the JPEG settings the choice between fine and I don't even know what that means. So
yeah. So if we look inside the camera, if we look at the sensor, we have 3 different kinds of pixels: red, green, and blue ones. So we have three color channels, and what the camera does is when it takes a picture, it's actually most people don't know that the sensor is first and foremost an analog device. It's not digital. It's analog. It collects photons, and those photons then get converted into a charge, and then there's a converter that looks, after the photo has been taken, looks at every single one of those 20, 30 million pixels and counts the charge and measures the charge in that, and then makes that into a digital value for that pixel. So if there's no charge in the pixel, it's black, 0. If it's full, then it's white, and anything in between is like a gray value, a different gray tone, right? So you end up with 3 different pictures: a red picture, a green picture, and a blue picture. And those are kind of interspersed on the sensor in what we call a Bayer pattern. That's a pattern where red, green, blue, and green, and they're all kind of are mixed up in this picture. And that gets saved to a file. That's called a RAW file. So this is the pretty much directly after making that analog picture into a digital picture, that's the RAW file. And if you know file formats, RAW file is actually pretty similar to a TIFF file. If you have worked with TIFF files, the innards of a RAW file are very similar to a TIFF file, but there are all those interspersed pixels. So even if you could look at the RAW file, it would just look bad. It would look pretty weird. Hardly anything to see on that. So RAW needs computation. RAW needs something. A processor needs to do something with RAW. First and foremost, it's called demosaicing. It's this RGB mosaic, this red, green, blue mosaic has been taken out of it, and there's a lot of math, and color is changed, and contrasts are changed and adjusted, and I don't know, like there's like 7, 8 different things that happen at least with a picture, with a RAW picture, when it gets converted to something that you can view on the screen, a JPEG or a preview in your software. So that happens.
And that's the drawback with RAW, is that you have to process it.
And that's actually that happens even if you set your camera to only RAW, to record only RAW files. The camera will still make a JPEG file.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see it on the back of the camera.
That's what you see on the back of the camera.
Yeah.
It kind of sticks that inside the RAW file. The RAW file has a little container inside that you can stick other files in, and that's a JPEG file that goes in there. So you have a preview, and that's how the camera can display that quickly to you. So the RAW file and this built-in JPEG file is actually can really get in your way. For example, if you set your camera to shoot black and white, you can do this on your camera. Now, if you do this when you shoot RAW, you see a black and white preview on the display. But again, remember, you're looking at a JPEG file that has been created from the RAW file. The actual RAW file is still in color. So
I kind of have this fight with Lisa a lot, because she'll use the scene modes on her camera. Like, she's taking a picture of a sunset, she changes it to sunset. Well, it's for sunsets. And I'm trying to explain to her, yeah, but what you're doing is the camera is doing a lot of processing on that file that you can't reverse unless you shoot RAW. Then you can reverse it.
Right, but the thing is, if you do this black and white thing in the camera and you come home and insert your card into the computer, your software, Lightroom, Aperture, whatever, imports that, and it displays the RAW file to you, and that's in color, right? So, so your black and white conversion that you did in the camera doesn't really show at home, so you have to do it again. So
you're getting in the weeds now too. You're doing the same.
Well, the thing is, you have to be you have to be clear about one thing. If you want to shoot RAW, if anyone who wants to shoot RAW needs to know that they need to process those pictures afterwards. You need to do something with them.
That's the bad news on it. Yeah.
Well, you know, your software will do some default processing on it. You insert the card, you ingest those pictures into the computer, and it will do some default processing, and that's usually, well, it's okay looking. But if you want more, you'll really have to do something. The problem with if you shoot JPEG and you kind of let the camera do all the processing for you, it doesn't only like do the processing for you, it also throws away a lot of the data.
Right.
And if we look at those 3 different color channels again in RAW, those can record a lot of information. We're talking about like 14 bits of information. That's like 16,000 different brightness levels per color channel. In JPEG, that's 8 bits per color channel. So you have like 256 different levels per color channel. That's not a lot. And if you start tweaking the contrast on those and changing, like making the sky bluer and then bringing out the clouds, you can end up with having some artifacts in there. You get some banding and things in the sky. So if you tend to process your pictures and tweak them and change the brightness in areas, you want to go RAW.
And you
Absolutely.
should.
That's what
and
you
should.
do.
Even if you're using, you know, Picasa on Windows or iPhoto on the Mac, when you import your photos, of course, both programs will show you an image, which means they've processed it. They've turned it into a JPEG. But it's nice to
And they can all read RAW files nowadays, yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to have the original. The argument against it in the old days was they were giant. But now with big memory cards, big hard drives, that's not nearly the issue it used to be. And all the cameras are fast enough to save them out quickly. Does it slow? It doesn't slow the camera down, does it?
No, not really.
No.
Not really. I mean, the camera has to capture the picture anyway. It has to convert it to RAW file anyway before it makes a JPEG. So the RAW is being created anyway.
Right.
It's if you only save JPEG, the RAW is still being made, but it's and then it's discarded after the picture has been saved as a JPEG.
If you're serious about photography, look for a camera that does RAW and has that capability. Many point-and-shoots do. The higher-end point-and-shoots do. And certainly all the DSLRs and the Micro Four Thirds cameras, all the cameras with interchangeable lenses do. By the way, I've been playing with, I bought, so I shouldn't say playing with because it was a pretty penny, the new Sony A7S. This is an interesting camera. I have an A7R, which is a 36 megapixel camera considered by many to be the best sensor on the market and beautiful for a full frame. And then Sony came out with this successor that was even more expensive, but instead of 36 megapixels, it's 12.
Which is still plenty for most things you need.
And the idea is, well, these bigger pixels, because they're going to be bigger, it's the same size sensor, will capture more light and it'll work better in low light. And I took a lot of pictures by candlelight last night, and I will vouch for them. They look great. It's a great camera. And it has one feature that the A7R doesn't have that I kind of like. Completely silent. So I can sneak up on people.
The A7R has a bit of a clunk.
It has a loud clunk. I think now they're using a digital front curtain, and on the A7R they must have been using a mechanical front curtain because it's definitely a mechanical clunk. It's not like a recorded clunk that is playing back. You can feel it. It's a clunk.
It's mechanical, yeah.
Yeah. So they've moved to a digital curtain. It's a lot of money for that camera, $2,500. But boy, am I happy with the images. It's really what Sony was intending to do, I think. Great camera. Hey, thank you, Chris Marquardt. DiscoverLightroom.com. Leo Laporte, the Tech Guy.